Speaking of really weird, really odd, unusual, strange, I've seen some characters very real, but walking around in clothing really outdated, at least from, maybe 1910, 1920. Very real, very seen, very talkative to other people, once in a while talking to me, but their dress betrays them as kind of archaic, really outdated, really damn old fashioned. They're seeing and speaking with other people, obviously. They notice me, but just around some parts, it's just their clothing's just really outdated. Great 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 grandmother's freaking clothing trunk. Who knows? I don't know. But really ancient clothing. And in fashion, just I've actually done in some of the books I've read fashions of different eras, different generations, different time periods, what clothing to wear. But their speech. Heavily Americanized in some capacities, as well as their accents. Very, very American in fashion in some cases. Versus mine not quite being an American accent per se. Some have noticed I sound more, from the British Isles a little. Plus my English is much better than some in the U.S. More studied, as many would happen to be there, because there's not much to do in some situations than others, other than read and study or debate. Intellectually sound people, more so than some, more so than many in the States. I mean, some people barely pass damn school, let alone anything else. Very low on their reading skills, very much not reading, very much not reading. And I've always enjoyed books. Can finish them just like that in a snap. But, as far as any type of research, really, anything I like reading, I typically pick up if I got the time. I'm fucking nearsighted, legally blind. I have to wear glasses and everything else sometimes. Use scopes to cross the street. Use a white cane with a red tip. The typical thing. Wear a freaking bright yellow vest to make sure cars see my ass so I don't get freaking run over and end up a damn puddle on the sidewalk. Very, very, very blind. Very nearsighted. Not crazy eyes. Just knocked about quite a bit. So still got wandering eyes a little. They fixed some of it, but eyes go a little bit. A little bit woozy and shit, a little bit all over the place. Legal blindness plus knocked in the head, rather hard. So eyes tended to wander back and forth for a while till the doctors managed to fix some of the muscles in my connecting my eyes and some of the nerves, so they wouldn't be wandering as much. Apparently, people point out I still have astigmatism like a Cupid doll. There's a lot of damage to me when I was growing up. I was already nearsighted. I think was part of my issue. Some thought a retardation issue, as some earlier doctors from 60s and 70s viewed any child with blindness as having other issues half the time, especially country doctors, or something of the sort. Early on, they thought blindness pertained to retardation in some cases, when that's not always the fact. I actually have a genius IQ. It just took some time and a lot of reading, a lot of thinking to older issues. Anyway, so there's some really mixed up situations. Ages back. But my IQ's rather high. I like intellectual debates and intellectual discussions. Win or lose in a conversation, typically you learn something. Discussing things, even if I know I'm highly educated in a subject, I still discuss with the people who are studied fully in those subjects. There's always something else you can learn. So I'm not one of those know-it-all kids. I never had been. I just happen to pass a lot of my classes with A's and B's. Sometimes they couldn't score me quite high enough. You put it that way, so they kind of snuck me into what they arranged as a GATE program, but it was kind of special ed, but for me it was GATE. The advanced classes. Figured I could study at my own pace without being crowded by the kids. Some kids were getting into the classes because they knew I read books, they knew I had good grades. And they think because of the bell curve and the grading system, they'd have an easy grade being pulled up because of the way the scholastic system is here rather than individually graded. They grade on the highest kids in the class and then apply grades to the rest. And that was going on for quite some time. The best and brightest in the classes, myself included, they would pull the class ahead, and I heard some other kids in the back of the room. Oh, he's in this class. Glad I took this. This will be easy. I think pointing me out. He's always reading books. But I wasn't some smart ass kid. I never have been. I'm very smart, but there's always more to learn. There's always more to discuss in some cases, or just to learn and listen to. I'm never above intellectually. I could talk to a fisherman as well a rocket scientist and still get something from it. I could talk to somebody basically intellectually on one level, not lettered in ways, and still attain something I hadn't known. And as sure as some bits I might actually add to them. It's just depending. I've never been arrogant about my intelligence. I just happen to be. That's what makes me a bright person. That's what makes me extremely talented. That's what makes me kind of round. I don't think I know it all. In fact, I know I don't know it all. But I'm always learning. And so once in a while I'm helping teach. But I'm not acting like I know everything. I'm not a smartass. I've known those types that limit intellect based on IQ rather than building them further in their IQ. They think they're the best and the brightest and the smartest, but they're always leaving themselves open for somebody as intelligent or more so, in some cases similar to myself. Not exactly average intellect, but smart enough. Just depends on the person. They always leave a chink in their armor somewhere. There's always something they miss when they're so haughty they think they're the best and brightest among some situations. Intellectual competitions in some cases. And some people forget about people like me. Isn't that sweet? Best and the brightest in some cases. Sometimes it's all depending on what a person knows or what a person doesn't, or how bright a person is. One of those weird things. Been a bit dim, based on lack of knowledge, but I've always been bright. Based on lack of knowledge, thought process, outright knowing certain facts or not, or being able to patchwork things back together. At some point I think I just dropped everything and tried living. After people kept trying to involve me in situations that weren't pertinent over here in the U.S. As far as situations go, they can pertain to law, involving laws, depending on the countryside, as well as courts, simpler things. And any of that mess goes. There are laws that apply to almost anyone. There are laws that apply to anyone, just depending on the law, how it's structured, what applies where. Know what I mean? All those weird things. Law applies equally in the U.S., but law applies differently in some places. But laws do apply. Laws do apply to all in some capacity or another. Just not every law. But many of them. There's always somewhere you can catch somebody on a issue versus not. Funny thing, I heard about the age of consent in the U.S. being differing in some states than not. However, for me, too young is too young. But too old and would be too old. If I'd been much younger, 16 might be an age I'd go after. Yeah, depending on the legalities of the state, if the party were interested, with their parents' permission. But that's depending on the state. Mostly the state side is 18. But it depends on the maturity of the person and the woman or the young man in the state, in part. A population growth and decline is partly why they lower and adjust age of consent in some cases versus not, based on population growth, decline, things like that. That's why the age of consent fluctuates in some cases. It's not widely known, but it's known by people like me that the age of consent is differing in some cases than not. Just depends on the situation, the countryside or the precinct. And it's one of those odd little things. Age of consent differs based on, in some cases, core family growth, population in decline. Core families growth, population in decline. Stable citizenship rather than dual citizenship or in and out of country. Stable, stable households and the like, stable situations. So that tends to fluctuate in some cases, even in the States. You look it up, but so many pedophiles and perverts roll around. You know, you don't want to let them know too much. I've seen situations like that. I don't like those people. Taking advantage of, just taking advantage. You know, it's one thing to have a sex life, but it's another thing to be a perverted motherfucker. You know, oh God, that's not safe for kids. All right, I gotta put this for adults. No cursing. Sorry, excuse me. But there's some really sick jerks out there. I'm just prone not to be heavily, myself, like leering at anybody. I took that whole thing about, if you look at a woman in lust, you may as well commit adultery with her, because chances are she'd be married, have a partner, be courted. You know, chances are she's not single, or unavailable, or just not interested. So I tend to keep that under my head. After that, there's once in a while private issues with televised porn and crap. I mean, some of them get paid for that, or they want to show off, or God knows what. A lot of that happens to be illegal. The stuff I watch is anyway. I watch a lot of different stuff, but it doesn't really consume me. I want a sex life, but typically never had one. Usually, too many weird issues. And as a few people put it, why is this young man in a hotbed situation? Well, you might want to think back a bit. Several may want to think back to at least the 70s. I'm thinking they're about. Could be earlier, but not certain. Too many parties involved. Too many differing royal parties as is, I suppose. There's something weird forming up like that. As obnoxious. And political parties as obnoxious. And warring parties. And whole stack of stuff, you know. Geez, I gotta color my hair again. Don't seem to be really losing any. Oh well. Yeah. Fix my eyebrows too. Jeez. Alright, where are my glasses? Too many people taking advantage of too many other situations. Isn't that cute? People enraging over some situations. Who are you? I said, man, none of your business. At least as of yet. You'll find out when things go public, and chances are there are going to be some people in trouble. At least enough. Things go properly in some capacity rather than not. But no, never been married, no kids. Typically no sex life. California and other spots, a bit murky. Same thing, Maine had been manipulated a bit by outside sources. And the school I went to and everything, the vicinity had been manipulated by people already sitting here or connected in other spots. I tended to notice that, and people couldn't figure out why they couldn't manipulate me. Oh, I full well know enough about what the hell went on, because I was around to begin with. Unlike some parties entering later who didn't know quite enough to... I guess some people went too damn nuts. Not being able to patch enough back together. Meanwhile, I was around at first, apparently. A bit during, and I think a bunch of people are fucking nuts. To be honest, everything looks goddamn crazy. The whole pack of kids trying to pass off had been. Overseas and over here. Dude, that's fucking that's totally insane. And using my DNA to boot. My own. Too many damn impersonators in the pot. I think what's real might be structured back to at least something appropriate at some point. There have been a handful of deaths in some cases too. I gotta freaking lay some dead to rest because I've at least been in some company here and there. No matter what the shit was going. Well, you got me. There's tons of stuff going on. All the way through it. I hear one more word about a fucking cause, I'm gonna smack somebody. Some people's cause was strictly about robbery, strangely enough, wouldn't it be? That's what somebody's whole cause was about. Straight out robbery. And tied in other abuses too, because everybody was attacking everybody else in some capacity, depending on where. including the 8 points. Great. All right. I always like Leonard Nimoy playing Spock, you know? Great guy. I like people like Sherlock Holmes, too. Great guy. Who was it? The detective there who was investigating the Jack the Ripper. Abernathy. I think that was the name. Was it Abernathy? Guy did have a heroin overdose, according to the movie, and I think historically too. Couldn't cope with the mess. I think so did Edgar Allan Poe. I think he was from out of states initially. I think he couldn't cope with the U.S. Some things have been briefly legal here in the States. Liquor, till that whole, let's see, some drugs, including things like cocaine. That used to be in the old Coca-Cola makeup. That's where they get the name Coke. Cocaine used to be in those, cocoa leaves used to be in those, in the creation of those sodas, because they used to use salsas and sodas of types 1800s or so as snake oil salesmen anyway. Used to sell them things by the bundle. I think it's kind of where sodas came from in a way, as a way to deliver medicines. Strange stuff like that. It had been a brief instance, I think. You always found those soda jerks at the pharmacies, right? Usually. Or they're connected with those. So, anyway, a lot of damn history, I know. Isn't that trippy? And there's a lot of real history I'm piecing back together. In some capacity. What I can. Kind of muddled. But people like doing that, don't they? By the way, I have a birthmark on my right forearm. But people are running around with tattoos, and most of them queer or lesbian or girl to boy or boy to girl, transgender stuff, or there's a whole mix of idiots running rampant. There are a whole bunch of emergency situations through the British Isles when I was young, on age back. Too many people in it, too many important people ended up, deceased. Unlike myself, when I had been around emergency situations, emergency news broadcasts, at least circa 1970s, maybe earlier if I was around then. Some things going on, maybe I could have been. Maybe late 60s, at least early 70s to some extent. Just, who knows what. Gonna flip those coins around, see what's on what. Flip that stuff around, rearrange it. Too weird. But, there's a whole mess of situations I just am knowledgeable of. Probably would be. Probably would have to be. Concerns old family ties and old bloodlines and everything else. And looks like my own connections, maybe some others. But I've been heavily involved in some situations, just not later. I've been heavily involved in different situations, just not later on. I looked at everything, walked off a long way back. People tried pulling me back in, walked away again. Said absolutely damn not. I'm not involving in this mess and this mix-up and this whatever criminal activity anybody's pulling. With no matter what right they think they have, they may just not. Everybody's got a plan in some case, good or bad, don't they? I'm a person of little to no deceit. Number one, I try not to lie to myself. That's the biggest thing. Then you can start determining truth from fiction. If if you're not able to lie to yourself or lie to yourself as much, you can come to certain facts if they pertain. And just because I'm honest and a decent person does not mean there aren't secrets and aren't things I hold to myself where I can. I'm honest, but I'm smart. And I'm not naive, and I don't think I ever really have been. Not concisely. Nor am I a coward. But sure as hell, I'll walk away from some situations if need be. Give little people a bit of clear area. Work what they need to. Still got caught up in some situations, but hey, happens. Of course, people keep pointing out for our stuff, we're not going to be able to use him for our stuff. Shit, I think he's real. He's too real for what we got going on, they said. Because I guess there's some act or some bad thing going on. Some bullshit parties. And apparently I'm an easy tag on. Some situations, quite likely. I mean, just in a spot because there's hardly anybody around me. And no protection, nothing going on. Usually. Sometimes, not normally. Basically told a lot of people, blow off. And things can be dealt with in the courts and the law within the structures of the laws. Not crimes. Not bloodshed, not war. Some cases there could be death based on treasonous acts, or anything can be traced back to. As far as treasons and abuses pertain, when and where? When, where, what? When, where, what, why? And what time? And what timeline? And what structure? Not worried about the sexual abuse I went through. Shit, a lot of people went through more. Worried about all the fucking crimes and shit I've either witnessed or just noticed were going on. Some people just don't want information to get out. But we'll have that happen, won't we?